My name is Elaine Carrington, and I turned 67 last spring. People in Charleston often describe me as steady, the kind of woman who keeps a vase of fresh magnolias on her desk and never raises her voice, even when the world tilts sideways. I've built my small event planning business with that same steadiness, one wedding and charity gala at a time. But that afternoon, as the sun slipped down over the harbor and my office windows caught the fading gold, all that calm cracked in an instant. The vibration of my phone startled me. I reached for it, expecting a client reminder or an invoice alert. Instead, I saw my son's name on the screen, Ryan, followed by a short message that stopped my breath cold. Mom, Madison and I think it's better if you skip the engagement party. For a long moment, I simply stared at the words. The hum of the ceiling fan sounded louder, the room somehow smaller. I read it again, thinking I'd misunderstood, but no. The sentence stayed the same, tidy and final. I'd spent 3 months planning that party. I'd found the rooftop venue, secured the catering, and placed deposits from my own savings to keep costs down. Every detail, string lights, gardenias, linen napkins was chosen with love. Ryan had said I had a gift for making things look effortless. Now he was asking me not to come at all. A late breeze moved through the open window, carrying the smell of salt and old oak. I put the phone down on my desk and folded my hands, as if stillness might hold me together. I wanted to call him to demand an explanation, but my throat refused to form the words. Instead, I whispered, "All right then," the way a person does when there's nothing left to bargain for. Outside, the sky darkened to copper and ash. The street below glowed with the first evening lights, people heading to dinner, unaware of how quiet my office had become. I turned off the lamp, gathered my purse, and stepped out into the humid Charleston dusk, carrying silence heavier than any bouquet. Chapter 2. The Weight of Years. The evening air followed me home, clinging to my skin as I unlocked the door of the small house I'd lived in for over 3 decades. The quiet felt familiar, but not comforting. I slipped off my shoes and set my purse on the kitchen counter beside a stack of old bills, my hands moving out of habit. When Ryan was little, this house had been full of noise plastic dinosaurs on the floor, drawings taped to the refrigerator, laughter spilling from every room. After my husband, David, died suddenly of a heart attack, that laughter became my compass. Ryan was only 13, too young to understand what permanence meant. I promised myself he would never feel the world as empty as I did that night. By day, I taught art classes at the local community center, watercolor lessons for retirees, finger painting for restless children. By night, I worked banquets and charity events, arranging flowers and linens, memorizing how light fell across a table. I told myself it was temporary, that hard work was a bridge between grief and stability. When Ryan earned a scholarship to college, I sold my grandmother's pearl necklace to cover what the grant didn't. I didn't regret it. Watching him step across that graduation stage years later, I believed every sacrifice had found its meaning. He'd hugged me afterward, his voice low against my shoulder. "I'll make you proud, Mom." And he did, for a long while. His first job, his first apartment, the night he called to say he'd met Madison, all of it felt like proof that love and effort guaranteed respect. I'd been sure that raising him alone had built something unbreakable between us. Now, standing in this same quiet kitchen, that certainty felt like a story I'd told myself to keep the loneliness away. The rain began just after sunset, soft at first, then steady enough to blur the streetlights outside my kitchen window. I stood there for a while, the phone in my hand, watching droplets slide down the glass. My thumb hovered over Ryan's name. It had been 2 days since his message. silence felt heavy, almost childish. But the need to understand pressed harder than pride. I pressed call. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, Mom." His tone was flat, careful, like he'd been waiting for this. "I got your text," I said quietly. "I'd like to hear it from you, not the screen." He exhaled. "Mom? It's just, Madison's parents want something a little more polished. They're hosting the engagement party. And, well," he paused. I could hear conversation in the background, laughter and clinking glasses. "They have certain expectations. It's not personal. Not personal." The words hung between us, cruel in their politeness. I glanced around the kitchen, my worn wooden cabinets, the lace curtains I'd sewn myself, the photo of him at 12 holding a fishing rod on Folly Beach. My world wasn't polished, but it had built him. "Madison's parents think I don't fit the image," I said, finishing what he couldn't. He hesitated. "It's not like that. They just want everything to look elegant." A faint voice came through the limelight, hurried, unmistakably hers. "Ryan, please, this is awkward." He mumbled something to her, but I'd already heard enough. I straightened, my voice calm. "Then you should focus on making it the kind of evening they'll remember." "Mom, it's all right," I said, cutting him off gently. "I understand." The rain kept falling as I ended the call. Outside, the water pooled in the streetlights, bright and fragile, like something beautiful that could never be touched again. The night after the call, the tide was high, and the marsh behind my apartment shimmered beneath the moonlight. I sat at the small kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, trying to quiet my thoughts. The rain had stopped, but the air was still thick with it, heavy and salt-sweet. Bills were spread across the table, electric, property tax, and a final invoice from the caterer for Ryan's engagement party. I'd already paid the deposit weeks ago. The phone rang again, its sudden sound cutting through the stillness. The name flashing on the screen made my stomach tighten. David Carrington, my ex-husband. I hesitated before answering. "Elaine," he said, his tone firm but falsely warm. "I just got off the phone with Ryan. He's feeling the pressure. The Holts expect something big for the honeymoon. Maybe we could both help out a little. You know, family chipping in together." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the stack of envelopes. "I'm not sure I understand," I said slowly. "He's marrying into one of the wealthiest families in Charleston." David sighed. The sound, long and familiar. "Yes, but appearances matter. Madison's parents are contributing plenty. It would mean something if you did too. A gesture. A gesture." That word sat bitter on my tongue. I traced a finger over the edge of the table, feeling the faint groove where years of writing checks had worn the wood. "I've already helped more than enough," I said quietly. "I covered the venue deposit, the flowers, half the catering. All things I wasn't even asked to do." There was a pause on the other end, followed by his clipped response. "Elaine, don't make this difficult. It's for Ryan. You've always said family comes first." Family, the same word they used when they needed something, never when they offered it. "I know what I said," I replied, steady this time. "But I've also learned that giving can turn into taking. When no one notices, it's always from the same person." "Are you refusing?" he asked, incredulous. I looked at the bills, the fading photo of Ryan on the mantel, the life I'd held together, piece by piece. "Yes, David," I said softly. "I've given enough." The line went silent. Outside, the marsh reeds swayed gently in the night breeze, and for the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. By morning, the tension in my chest had settled into a quiet ache. I drove across town to Nora Weaver's flower shop, needing her steady presence more than I cared to admit. Nora and I had met 20 years ago at a charity gala I coordinated. She'd supplied the centerpieces and stayed late to help me clean up spilled champagne. Since then, she'd been my truest friend, equal parts. Sharp humor and stubborn kindness. The bell above her door chimed as I entered. The air smelled of magnolia and damp earth, a fragrance that clung to memory. She looked up from trimming a cluster of white roses, her hands moving with practiced grace. "You look like you slept in your thoughts again," she said. "I heard from David last night." I told her, settling onto the stool near the counter. "They want me to pay for part of the honeymoon." After uninviting me, Nora stopped trimming, set the scissors down, and gave me a look that could cut straighter than any blade. "And what did you say?" I said no. A smile tugged at her mouth. "About time." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You do realize all those contracts for the venue? Catering, decorations, they're under your company's name." "Right." I frowned. "Yes, of course. But if I pull out, it'll look unprofessional. I have my reputation to consider." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Elaine, you built that entire event from scratch. They broke it when they cut you out. Let them clean up their own mess." Her words hung in the air, gentle but firm. That afternoon, back in my office, I opened my laptop. The contracts were neatly filed under Carrington Events and Design. I began drafting short, polite notices to each vendor explaining that, due to personal reasons, the event would now proceed under Ryan Carrington's direction. Each message was calm, professional, and final. When the last email was sent, I sat back and exhaled. The silence felt different this time, less like defeat, more like a door closing with intention. The morning light crept pale and gold over Charleston as I parked at the airport. The air was still cool, carrying that faint, briny scent that always reminded me of summer mornings long ago. I found a seat in the corner of a small cafe near the gates, ordered black coffee, and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on the booking page, waiting for me to make a decision. I searched for flights to Honolulu, then narrowed it to Oahu. The date I selected was deliberate, the same day as the engagement party. My fingers hesitated only once before pressing confirm. The ticket number appeared on the screen. Solid and real. Outside the glass wall of the terminal, planes rolled across the tarmac in slow, deliberate rhythm. I sipped my coffee, feeling something inside me settle, the quiet peace that comes when you've finally stopped arguing with what life has already decided. As I waited for the confirmation email to arrive, a memory rose unbidden. Ryan at 7 years old, standing knee-deep in the Atlantic surf, shrieking with laughter as the waves chased him. He'd turned back toward me then, hair plastered to his forehead, shouting, "Come on, Mom." Back then, I had always been the one to follow. Now, decades later, I was the one walking toward the water, just a different ocean, a different kind of freedom. Before closing my laptop, I opened my inbox and drafted one final message. To all vendors, please note that, effective immediately, the event will proceed under Ryan Carrington's direction. Thank you for your professionalism and understanding. I read it twice, then hit send. The sound of the departing planes filled the space around me, soft but sure, like the beginning of something I no longer needed anyone's permission to claim. The terminal loudspeaker called my flight as the Charleston sky turned pale rose, the kind of dawn that promises calm. I gathered my bag, boarding pass tucked neatly inside, and walked toward the gate. Around me, travelers murmured sleepy goodbyes. Children yawned against their mothers' shoulders. Everything ordinary. Everything steady. Somewhere across the city, preparations for Ryan's engagement party would be beginning. I pictured the rooftop terrace overlooking the harbor, the rows of tables set beneath hanging lights. At least they were supposed to be. Without my coordination, The timing between vendors would already be off. As the plane began boarding, chaos was blooming back in Charleston. Carlos, the venue manager, stood beneath the canopy of string bulbs that flickered weakly against the humid air. Half of them weren't working. He scrolled through his messages, no clear direction, no updated layout from anyone. The caterer, Teresa Morgan, arrived late, her staff unloading the wrong dishes. The menu I had approved: grilled shrimp, rice pilaf, lemon pound cake had been replaced with trays of cold sandwiches and wilted greens. Guests arrived to confusion. The sound system stuttered between songs. The floral arrangements, once meant to mirror Charleston's soft coastal palette, clashed violently with the neon decorations someone had added last minute. Within half an hour, the rooftop looked less like a celebration and more like a hurried mistake. At one of the tables, Judith Holt whispered to a friend, her tone sharp beneath her polite smile. Phones were out, cameras flashing. Posts began to appear online, pictures of the drooping lights, captions about the event of the season gone sideways. By the time Ryan and Madison made their entrance, the damage was already done. She took one look around, color draining from her face. "This isn't what we agreed on," she hissed under her breath. "I did everything you asked," Ryan shot back, voice low but strained. "You said you didn't need her." The argument grew louder, words slipping past restraint. Guests turned. A glass broke somewhere near the buffet table. Someone tried to laugh it off. But the tension spread like smoke. On the tarmac, my plane's engines began to hum. I settled into my seat, fastening the belt as the last passengers boarded. My phone vibrated once, twice, then again Ryan's name flashing across the screen, followed by David's. I watched the light blink until it faded. Then I turned the phone off and slipped it into my bag. The engines roared as the plane lifted from the runway. Through the small oval window, Charleston unfurled below its church steeples, and slow rivers bathed in morning light. The city grew smaller, softer, until it was just a shape of gold and gray pressed against the horizon. I leaned back, let the hum of flight fill the silence, and closed my eyes. The noise of the world fell away, leaving only the steady rhythm of air and freedom. The air in Oahu was softer than I expected, warm and laced with salt and hibiscus. My first morning there, I walked barefoot along the north shore, the sand cool under my feet, the sea breathing in slow, endless rhythm. Each wave seemed to erase something: worry, anger, the last traces of shame I hadn't realized I still carried. By midday, I found a small meditation garden tucked behind a temple near the hills. Wind chimes swayed in the trees, their tones blending with the hum of insects and the rustle of palms. An older woman tending orchids looked up as I passed. She smiled, as if she'd been expecting me. "You look like you've been carrying something heavy," she said in a lilting voice. I almost laughed. "I suppose I have." She wiped her hands on her apron and nodded toward the sea beyond the fence. "Then let the tide carry what no longer belongs to you." Her words stayed with me long after she returned to her plants. That evening, back at the small inn where I was staying, I opened a notebook I'd bought at the airport. The pages smelled faintly of paper and rain. I began to write not about anger or betrayal, but about space, about what it meant to live quietly without asking to be seen. The sentences came slowly, like breathing, boundaries, stillness, choice. I wrote until the light outside turned golden, until the ache in my chest softened into something lighter. For the first time in months, I didn't think about Charleston, or the party, or the phone I'd left turned off beside the bed. I thought only of the ocean, steady and endless, and the freedom of letting the water take what was never mine to keep. The sun was slipping into the Pacific when I stepped onto the balcony of my hotel room. The sky painted in coral and violet. The ocean moved below in slow, deliberate rhythm, each wave folding into the next like a secret kept between breaths. I carried a cup of tea in one hand and my phone in the other, still turned off since I'd landed. For a moment, I hesitated, then powered it on. Notifications flooded the screen, missed calls, messages, but only one caught my eye. Ryan Carrington. One voicemail. I pressed play. His voice came through soft, strained. "Mom, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let them do that to you. Everything fell apart, and it's my fault. I don't know how to fix it." He paused, the sound of him breathing hard into the silence. "I just want you to come home." My throat tightened. I sat down, letting the sea breeze brush against my face. His words held a sadness I'd once have run toward, desperate to mend, but I felt no urgency now, only understanding. He was still my son, but the kind of help he needed wasn't mine to give anymore. When the message ended, I listened once more, then deleted it gently. The screen dimmed, fading to black. I looked out at the horizon and whispered, "Love doesn't always mean returning." The wind carried the words out over the water until they disappeared with the tide. Months later, Charleston greeted spring with soft sunlight and the faint scent of wisteria drifting through the streets. From my office window, the harbor stretched wide and calm, the water catching streaks of orange and rose as the day folded into evening. I'd reopened my business quietly, taking on smaller events at first, then larger ones as word spread. The reputation I thought I'd lost had only deepened, steady, graceful, dependable. A young planner named Lily now worked beside me, eager and curious, her questions reminding me of the woman I used to be when everything still felt new. I found myself guiding her through details, timelines, lighting, the rhythm of a room, passing on what I'd learned from years of chaos and beauty. The office had changed too. The clutter was gone, replaced by space and light. On the shelf above my desk sat 2 framed photographs, one of David, smiling beside the old sailboat we once restored together, and one of Ryan, taken years before all of this, his grin wide, sunlight on his face. I'd moved his picture there intentionally, not as an act of longing, but of peace. Sometimes, when I glanced at it, I still felt the echo of hurt, but it no longer hollowed me. It was simply part of the story, folded into the quiet rhythm of who I had become. As dusk settled, I turned off my lamp and stepped to the window. Across the harbor, the first lights flickered on, scattering gold over the darkening water. The air smelled of salt and new beginnings. I whispered, almost to the wind itself, "You're forgiven, but I'm free." Then I stood there until the last line of sunlight faded, content to let the evening hold me exactly where I was.